paid my dues time after time. I've done my sentence, but committed no crime.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Members, please take your conversations off the floor. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Res 1057, I call up S 1383, the Save America Act, and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 1383, an act to establish the Veterans Advisory Committee on Equal Access and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1057, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 119-19, modified by the amendment printed in House Report 119-493, modified by the amendment specified in Section 6 of House Resolution 1057, is adopted, and the bill, as amended, is considered read. The bill, as amended, is debatable for 1 hour equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee of House Administration or their respective designees. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stahl, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Morrell, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members shall have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include additional material on the bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself so much time as I may consume.
The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of S 1387, the Save America Act. I thank my colleague Chip Roy for his work on this bill, as well as my colleagues on the Committee on House Administration. Today, Mr. Speaker, we have an opportunity to move forward with election integrity, to regain the trust of the American people and the way that we operate our elections. The Save America Act has 2 key principles, both of which are common sense. That individuals that want to vote in U.S. elections should be U.S. citizens, and we should have a proof of citizenship when individuals register to vote. The second principle is that individuals, when they vote, should show voter ID. Both of these are common sense principles. Now, we know there's some on the other side of the aisle that want non-citizens to vote in our elections. In fact, we could just look at our nation's capital, which allows non-citizens to vote under current law in municipal elections. I'm of the view that U.S. elections should be for U.S. citizens only, and that we should be proving that citizenship at the point in time that an individual registers to vote. We should also be showing voter ID when we go and vote. This is a common sense principle. The American people know that you need to show a photo identification when you board an airplane, you open a bank account, or you buy a 6-pack of beer. I'm often reminded we had a debate at committee, and I flew home to my home state of Wisconsin. I went to go buy a 6-pack of beer. The clerk recognized me, said, "Hi, Brian," said, "How you doing?" Said, "I need to see your ID." I handed over my ID, confirmed it, allowed me to buy the beer. I think it's nuts that we protect our beer in this country more than our ballots and jurisdictions. This is our opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to change that, to instill significant election integrity. But before I close, let me tell you, today during this debate, we're likely to hear all sorts of comments from my colleagues on the left. They'll make arguments about disenfranchisement. They'll use terms like Jim Crow 2.0. I'll remind everyone watching to reflect back on the same language that was used when Georgia instituted election integrity provisions in 2021. And we can actually look, because the state of Georgia operated 2 significant elections since then. And voter participation remained high. And the University of Georgia conducted a significant survey to determine how did people experience the election in the state of Georgia. And what they found was people had a positive experience of how that election was conducted across all key demographic groups. And the survey found statistically 0% of blacks had a poor or negative voting experience in the state of Georgia. Making sure that it's easy to vote and hard to cheat is a core principle. And as we instill election integrity in our system, we will see more people participating because they will have faith in our elections. I encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of S 1383, the Save America Act, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I stand here not just in strong opposition to this bill, but in strong opposition to recent efforts by this administration to take over, literally take over, American elections. But not just any American election, this American election. The one that is happening now. Ballots have already been mailed overseas and military voters for several state primaries. I'm opposed to this bill, to any effort by the President of the United States to nationalize a federal election for partisan purposes, because I believe in this country. I ardently, fiercely believe that the United States, the shining city on a global hill, represents the best humanity has to offer. I believe the United States should, it must, stand in defense of and on behalf of every single American. Our republic was founded on the simple yet revolutionary idea that our American government derives its power from the consent of the governed, from the votes of the people. Yet achieving that idea has required struggle over generations and generations. With the Reconstruction Amendments, the 19th Amendment, America expanded its right to vote. Americans have defended this right against efforts to restrict access to the ballot, to pull back from history's progress. Congress has repeatedly affirmed and defended the ability for every American to participate in our elections, including through the passage of the historic Voting Rights Act of 1965. The principle of government with the consent of the governed is why we're all here today. The principle is what we swore an oath to defend. But this Republican majority has made a sharp turn away from that sacred principle. This bill, which we are considering today, represents a betrayal of every representative principle of this country, because passage of this bill, support for it from within this chamber, would be a tacit endorsement of a broader, ominous, dangerous agenda. The Save America Act is not an isolated piece of policy. It is part of a concerted effort by the Republican Party's leadership and this administration, this president, to centralize partisan power over American elections, to diminish the authority of American states, to once again stoke fear and mistrust of immigrants and in our electoral system, all for the partisan gain of Speaker Johnson and the White House this November. Just days ago, President Trump publicly called on Republicans to take over, to nationalize voting across the country. This is not hyperbole. This is not hysteria. These are his words. So it should not surprise anyone that the Save America Act would require states to provide sensitive personal voter data to Kristi Noem's Department of Homeland Security, to send your personal data directly to the federal government, to directly invade your privacy, your family's privacy. And why does the president want to send your information to DHS? Why does he want to take over this election? Why would he advocate for Republican control of federal elections, a direct affront to the United States Constitution? Because he knows that without such drastic action, Republicans will lose the midterm elections in 9 months. Just look at recent election results in Virginia. I know the president has. Look at them in New Jersey. Look at them in Texas. Americans know that everything in this country has gotten more expensive under this administration. So it should be no surprise that this bill would make voting more expensive, because passports, which millions of Americans don't have but would need to register to vote, cost $130. But beyond the cost, these Republican efforts to nationalize how we vote have nothing to do to safeguard our elections. Instead, they threaten the very fabric of American self-government. Now, ensuring the integrity of elections is not only legitimate, it is American, but integrity is achieved through the rule of law, through adherence to our Constitution, through trust in the American people, of the electorate. The security of our elections is not advanced, however, by a Department of Justice under Attorney General Bondi that sends an extraordinary, extortionate letter to Minnesota officials. She suggested violence by federal agents in the Twin Cities would only end if Minnesota just turned over sensitive voter data to the federal government, violating your privacy, demanding your information at the barrel of a Border Patrol rifle. The same data the Save America Act would force every state in this nation to surrender. This letter, the president's rhetoric, their push for Americans' personal voter data, none of this can be divorced from the legislative push we see here today. And we all know why. The Save America Act is part of a comprehensive Republican strategy to cement power this year. Speaker Johnson wants to make it harder for Americans to vote, easier for Washington Republicans to control how elections are run. But let us not forget that elections in this country are administered by clerks, by secretaries of state, and by commissions and bipartisan boards chosen by citizens in every single community in America. They are not run out of the Oval Office. They are not dictated to by partisan interests. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to oppose the Save America Act. I implore them to reject efforts that would centralize control in the hands of Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, or Kristi Noem, or over how Americans vote, over who is allowed to vote. And most of all, I urge this chamber to reaffirm its commitment to the fundamental democratic principles that all eligible citizens should have the opportunity to participate in free, fair, and secure elections without unnecessary burdens and without partisan interference. I strongly urge defeat of this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Morelli, reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Illinois, a leader on this legislation, a member of the Committee on House Administration, Ms. Miller, to speak for 3 minutes.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the Save America Act ensures that only American citizens vote in American elections. This should be the easiest yes vote this year. The American people want the Save America Act. 83% of adults support requiring a photo ID to vote, as do 73% of Democrat voters. But Democrat politicians standing here today, oppose it, just as they have opposed every election integrity measure. Democrats cannot win on their ideas because their agenda has made life harder for American families. The Democrat Party knows that cheating is their only path to victory. Their goal is to replace the votes of American citizens with those of illegal aliens. House Republicans are standing up for the American people here today. Congress has a responsibility to protect the integrity of our elections. The Save America Act upholds that duty. I urge my colleagues to listen to the American people and vote yes. America is watching, and I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask Ms. Miller, do 80% of Americans want the Department of Homeland Security and ICE to have your personal, private information and data? I think not. With that, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Alabama and a member of the House Administration Committee, my friend Ms. Sewell.
The gentlelady from Alabama is recognized.
I rise in strong opposition to Trump's voter suppression bill. In recent months, President Trump's attempt to interfere in the midterm elections have become more brazen and alarming day by day. We've seen state legislators redraw maps to benefit Republicans. We've seen the FBI raid an election office and seize ballots in Georgia. And most recently, President Trump threatened a federal takeover of our election in clear violation of the Constitution. This week, Trump's efforts to rig the elections have made their way to Congress, where Republicans are pushing this piece of legislation, which will block millions of voters from casting their ballots. Let us be clear, this is not a voter ID bill. It is a voter suppression bill, plain and simple. This bill is so extreme that even driver's license would be insufficient to register to vote. Instead, Americans will be required to present their birth certificate or their passport. The reality is that half of Americans do not have a passport. And get this bill also requires states to turn over personal identifiable information to the Department of Homeland Security, the same department whose rogue agents are responsible for the deaths of 2 American citizens in Minnesota. Here's the truth. Under this bill, tens of millions of eligible Americans will be blocked from casting their ballot. It's simply unacceptable and un-American. The ability of voters to choose their leaders is foundational to our freedom. It is a freedom that generations of Americans have fought, bled, marched for, many in my hometown of Selma, Alabama. We know that it is so important that we safeguard these important truths. Our freedom is under assault. Make no mistake, Republicans know that their policies are failing, that prices are going up, that jobs are going away, that health care is being slashed, and that American people are struggling to make ends meet. Republicans know that they cannot win on the merits. So rather than change their policies, they're seeking to change the rules. John Lewis was not bludgeoned on a bridge in my hometown for the Republicans and Donald Trump to take these freedoms away from us. This is a blatant power grab, and Democrats will not stand for it. Vote no on this disastrous legislation.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett, to speak on the bill.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Save America Act will block illegal immigrants and non-citizens from voting. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there being spread by the media and my friends across the aisle. House Republicans and President Trump want to protect the ballot box and ensure integrity in our elections across this great country. Only U.S. citizens should participate in the election process. The laws we create in Congress affect all Americans, and Americans should be the ones who select their leaders. The Save America Act puts in place safeguards, Mr. Speaker, to prevent non-citizens from abusing our democratic process. United States citizens should be the people choosing our elected leaders, not illegal immigrants. Now, look, I'm not a drinker. Everybody knows that. But I know if I go to Weigel's in Knoxville, Tennessee, down on the corner of Emory Road and Tazewell Pike, and if I go in there to buy a six-pack or a can of Skull or a scratch-off, dadgummit, I gotta produce an ID. When you purchase a firearm, when you board a plane, when you open a bank account, if I put $100 in the bank and then right then and ask for 20 of it back, guess what? I gotta show a dadgum ID. Why can't you vote for an elected official without one, Mr. Speaker? This legislation codifies President Trump's executive action to secure our voter registration process, which has been a key platform of President Trump this term. Democrats are lying, Mr. Speaker, saying this bill prevents minorities from registering to vote. It protects their vote. It protects every American citizen's vote. And it disgusts me, and frankly, I find it racist to assume that minorities cannot obtain an ID. We need to have the guts to stand up and protect our dadgum elections, Mr. Speaker, and that means we need to pass the Save America Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have great respect from the gentleman from Tennessee, but I do want to inform him it's actually current federal law prevents non-citizens from voting in federal elections, so he may want to look that up. With that, I will yield 2 minutes to my great friend, a gentle lady from California and a member of the Committee on House Administration, Ms. Torres.
The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, let's stop pretending the Save America Act is about election security, because it is not. This bill is about power and silencing Americans. Republicans don't want voting. Thousands of Americans are protesting, demonstrating against the policies of this administration. Republicans know that they will lose the midterms. The president asked them to cancel the election, and guess what? This bill is the next best thing to that. This is a show your papers mandate to disqualify Americans who oppose their evil agenda. Americans would have to appear in person and present a passport or birth certificate just to register. And again, every single time they update their registration, every time you move, if you get married, if you get divorced, blah, blah, blah. Here's who it will hurt. More than 140 million Americans don't have a passport, including Republicans, by the way. As many as 69 million women who follow the traditional practice of changing their name after marriage do not have a birth certificate that matches their legal name. Republicans know this and want to use that misinformation to block them from voting. This bill would eliminate the voter registration methods over 90% of Americans rely on, including online, mail-in, and DMV registration. In rural areas, Americans would be forced to drive 7 or 8 hours round trip just to show documents, and they would have to do it every single time they move. When Kansas tried a similar law, 32,000 eligible citizens were blocked from registering. 0 non-citizens were found because election officials had already verified their eligibility. Republicans call this voter ID. This is voter suppression. When they can't win on ideas, they try to win by blocking the ballot and taxing your right to vote. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this attack on our democracy, and I yield back to the ranking member.
The gentleman from New York
I reserve my time, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Luna.
The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleagues are spending a lot of time lecturing the American people on how this is going to require you to show your papers. But last time I checked, during COVID, they demanded that if you simply wanted to go to a funeral, be with your loved ones while they were dying, or get married, you had to show your papers. In fact, in New York City, they were literally asking you for your COVID passport. Yet the Save America Act, a common sense piece of legislation that requires 2 things, voter ID plus proof of citizenship, is being labeled by people in the Senate and people in this very chamber as Jim Crow era laws. Well, let me remind the American people of history. It was the Democrat Party that championed the Jim Crow era laws. And this is the farthest thing from it. In fact, if you're doing that, you're insulting over 70% of your voters, Democrats, who believe that voter ID is the best way to secure an election. Then we have the argument that you have from Blue Anon saying that Trump is trying to steal the election and Orange Man bad, and this is somehow going to fix the midterms. But the fact is that if we are going to play that game, then you would want voter ID and you would want to secure the elections. So please support this legislation. I do not believe that Barack Obama, in showing his voter ID, was engaging in Jim Crow era law or pushing that type of perspective. And for the same people that are advocating, saying that Kristi Noem and ICE will demand your personal information and you will be under surveillance, let I remind them that they actually all authorized the reauthorization of FISA, unreformed, that violated your constitutional rights. So this is pretty simple. If you are not an American, you do not get to vote in our elections. This is not a free-for-all country. A majority of Americans support this. A majority of the world has voter ID in place. It is not racist. I appreciate my colleagues and the House admin for doing this, and I support all of my colleagues and urge them to vote for this piece of legislation. I yield my time.
The gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to yield 2 minutes to my friend and a fellow member of the House Administration Committee, the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Johnson.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, many of my colleagues have said that this bill, the Save America Act, and the constant attempts by Republicans to clamp down on voter fraud solve a problem that doesn't exist, and I couldn't disagree more. The problem is that Republicans are losing at the ballot box. They are losing young voters, voters of color, and women. So there is a problem, that no one is buying into the Republican ideals and policies, and the only solution is for Republicans to engage in a coordinated effort to silence the American people. They want to stop from exercising their most fundamental constitutional right, the right to vote. And the Save America Act doesn't save anything. Instead, it continues to restrict access to the ballot box, imposing a modern-day poll tax and a dangerous show your papers mandate. Under this bill, Americans would be required to appear in person or by mail, just hoping that the election clerk accepts their documentation, and present either a passport or a birth certificate to register to vote, and every single time they want to cast a ballot. A passport costs $150, and a copy of the birth certificate can cost up to $60. Many Americans just simply can't afford to purchase these documents. Those constitute a poll tax. The reality is that half of Americans, more than 140 million citizens, don't have a valid passport, And as many as 69 million women who have taken their spouses' names do not have a birth certificate matching their legal name. Because this legislation has a requirement to show documents, this legislation would eliminate online voter registration. I want to be very clear. This is how people give up. They quit trying to register to vote, and that results in them not voting and their voices not being heard. That is the intent of what is going on here. None of this is about election integrity or protecting the ballot box. And Republicans come to this floor to talk in front of the cameras. They say it's about this, but it is blatantly lying to the American people. Our job in Congress is to make it easy for people to participate in our democracy, to make it easy for people to vote and not make it harder. The bottom line is simple. The Save America Act and the countless numbers of other efforts Republicans are pushing will deny millions of Americans their right to vote.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Tenney, who's the founder and chair of the Election Integrity Caucus.
The gentlewoman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to first address a comment by the ranking member, Mr. Relly. We both hail from New York. He's a dear friend. But I just wanted to point out something. New York City Democrats actually put up a bill to allow non-citizens to vote in their elections. Our far left-leaning, and I think you could argue that very easily, Court of Appeals, New York's highest court, actually turned that down and said, no, only citizens can vote in our elections. That's New York state law, and that's our national law. And I just want to make sure that that was your response to Mr. Burchett, to make sure you understood that we've addressed this in New York, and we have established that only citizens can vote. And we want to make sure we secure the ballot and know that citizenship in this country has value. There is nothing more profound or important for the preservation of our constitutional republic and to keep the power in we the people than the sacred right to vote. Democrats have continuously undermined election integrity, sowing the seeds of mistrust with mail-in ballots failing to provide ID, not proving that there is indeed one citizen, one vote. This bill merely requires that you prove that you're a citizen and that we secure the ballot by knowing that there's one citizen, one vote. Consider this situation, and as the co-founder and the chair of the Election Integrity Caucus, I would love to see every legal citizen vote in every election. I know I have as a proud American citizen. Consider this situation. If you had discovered that you had won the lottery, only to find out that a cartel member had perfectly replicated your winning lottery ticket, and it was worth, let's just say, $200 million, maybe even $50 million, and you went to go turn in your ticket, but somebody else, without a valid ID, stole your identity and took your money, you would probably argue that we should have a valid voter ID. And I only wish that Americans would value their right to vote, as simple as it is, and to recognize that important act of voting as important to preserving our country, our republic, and keeping power again in we the people. A secure, valid ID system is all that.
Expired.
I yield an additional 15 seconds.
I just urge all of my colleagues to join the Election Integrity Caucus and stand for election integrity and make sure that every citizen eligible to vote votes in every election. I yield.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield a minute to the gentle lady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore.
The gentle lady from Wisconsin is recognized.
Here we go again, y'all. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. He's aggrieved about that. And so now he's peddling claims of fraud as a pretext to take over our elections and disenfranchise millions. He tried to extort Minnesota into handing over their voter files, raided Fulton County. He's sued Wisconsin and other states for their voter data. And this bill would provide Kristi Noem access to all the voter files in every state and upend the authority and the independence of states and counties. Why? So they can rig the elections and save Republicans. We have to reject the so-called Save America Act and save our free and fair elections and save our democracies. And with that, I would yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. The gentlelady from New York reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my colleague, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Fine, to speak on the bill.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes in this room, I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. We are hearing that the world is going to end, and Americans need to understand that this bill does two and only two things. By the way, things that we already do in Florida today, and we don't have issues with our elections. Number one, it says that you have to show a photo ID in order to vote. This is something that people overwhelmingly support because we have to do it in every aspect of our lives. And second, it says you should have to prove you're a citizen in order to register. Now, the argument that's made against these things is it is somehow racist to require them. What I find repulsive about that argument is it is racist to imply that minority communities somehow don't have the ability to go and get a photo ID, somehow don't have documentation to prove that they're an American. I have talked to my constituents about this, and they're aghast at the idea that anyone would make this claim. Now, look, this is a real issue. In Florida, I worked on a bill when I was in the legislature where people would call who had been accidentally put on jury duty and said, hey, I don't know how I got registered to vote, but I'm not an American. And we had to take them off jury duty. And Democrats opposed our efforts even there to clean up the rolls. There's nothing we have more important to do here than to make sure that Americans are confident in our elections and the results that they achieve, particularly with the kind of heated rhetoric that we say here. But why do they oppose it? There's one simple reason: because they want to cheat. We pass this bill, we clean up our elections, and we make sure that Americans can have confidence in not only what we do here, but in the elections that we're going to have this November. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do want to say my distinguished colleague from Florida conveniently left out one part of what this bill does, which is to share your personal private data with the Department of Homeland Security. From this point forward, if this bill were to become law, every single person, when they register to vote, all their data will be sent to the Department of Homeland Security, not the Department of Elections, not some other department that has control over the election process. The Department of Homeland Security, which includes ICE, whose people have now killed American citizens on American streets. If that's what Americans want, and I'm pretty sure they do not, but somehow the gentleman forgot to mention that that's what this bill does. And with that, let me yield a minute to the distinguished gentleman from California, my friend, Mr. Correa.
And thank you. And Mr. Speaker, let me just stick to the
gentleman from
facts.
California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, in California, when you register to vote, you do so under penalty of perjury. Then they cross-check your information to make sure that you're eligible. And then we have a very active district attorney in Orange County that says, if you violated this under penalty of perjury, we're going down on you. Instead, I would ask my friends, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, let's do everything we can to make sure that every eligible American actually votes. Why would you take away the right of a veteran to vote, of a senior to vote, somebody in the military to vote? Let's go the other way. Democracy is stronger when you have stronger participation. Vote no, and let's move on with democracy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rose.
The gentleman from the great state of Tennessee, Mr. Rose, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Stile. I rise in strong support of the Save America Act because nothing matters more than securing our elections. Our republic depends on it. Free, fair, and honest elections, unmarred by fraud or suspicion, are fundamental to our constitutional republic. The right of citizens to have their votes properly counted without illegal dilution is vital to determining the rightful winner. This legislation is straightforward. It requires proof of citizenship for voter registration and voter ID for federal elections. It ensures only American citizens participate in American elections and provides states with tools to determine and verify the citizenship and maintain accurate voter rolls. There is only one reason not to pass this, and we all know what that is. Some in this chamber oppose anything that interferes with their effort to control elections and consolidate power. Congressional Democrats sat silent as the Biden administration allowed millions of illegal immigrants into the United States. I fear the intention was to garner votes. But my colleagues across the aisle now have an opportunity to prove me wrong by supporting this widely popular legislation. The Save America Act reinforces that voting is a right only of citizens, not just anyone within our borders. Opposition to this act makes sense in that context, but that is precisely why we must pass it. We have a duty to the American people to preserve their voice, protect their vote, and secure their sovereignty, and we must save the republic from forces that would undermine our most sacred democratic institution. I urge my colleagues to pass the Save America Act, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do think the only people in America who are confused about American citizens being the only people voting in federal elections are my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I think most Americans get that, which is why we see no evidence of the widespread fraud that they keep talking about a solution desperately in search of a problem. With that, I'd like to yield a minute to the distinguished gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Williams.
The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the SAVE Act is back before the House today, and right along with it is yet another attempt at voter suppression. It is no coincidence that this is happening right before the midterm elections. In January, the FBI raided the Fulton County Election Office, my home county, where I'm a voter. That raid was a bold attempt to intimidate voters in the fighting fifth. The Save America Act is just another part of a scheme by House Republicans in the Trump administration to take over our elections. Atlanta civil rights leaders like my predecessor, the late Congressman John Lewis, faced one of the bloodiest battles he ever faced over our right to vote. The SAVE Act would make it harder for millions of Americans to get registered to vote by requiring in-person registration at elections offices, government offices with government hours, y'all. This is a burden for caregivers and any hardworking American with a 9-to-5 job. Y'all, the SAVE Act is an unfunded mandate to silence voters. The goal of this bill is voter suppression, plain and simple. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this terrible bill. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the House Majority Leader, Leader Scalise, to speak on the bill.
The king of the king cakes is recognized for 1 minute.
Laissez le bon temps brûler, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Wisconsin for yielding, and especially thank him and Chip Roy for bringing the Save America Act to the House floor. This is a bill that's critically important to one of the most precious franchises in America, and that is that sacred right to vote, the right that so many gave their lives to preserve, to allow, to pass on to our next generation. And the importance of that vote is even more underscored when you recognize that, yes, there have been times where people have stolen your vote, Mr. Speaker. That veteran that was talked about that deserves the right to vote, well, if somebody votes illegally, Mr. Speaker, they are stealing that veteran's vote. They're stealing your vote. They're stealing everybody's vote if we allow people that aren't legally eligible to vote to participate in elections. And so how can you best preserve that? One way is that when you're registering to vote, you have to prove citizenship. It's in this bill. Another is when you go vote, you just have to show your ID. This is not some convoluted idea, Mr. Speaker, but you hear the other side talking about it's the end of the world. Their own leaders have referred to it as Jim Crow. It's not the first time that they've used that phrase. They used that when the state of Georgia put an ID requirement on voting. They said it was going to be horrible. It was going to take away people's rights. It was going to disenfranchise minority voters, Mr. Speaker. That's what they said. But then what happened? We've actually got history to go look at. After Georgia passed that law that was called every ridiculous name in the book, what we saw was record participation in elections. You actually had the University of Georgia that went and asked voters after that election, and a whopping 0%, Mr. Speaker, of black voters said that they had a poor experience going to the ballot. Over 72% said they had an excellent experience at the ballot. But then you can go further. You can ask American people who, by the way, the American people get this. They understand that there is examples of voter fraud. I come from a state where our elections commissioner went to jail, yes, went to federal prison for stealing elections. And we cleaned up our election system in our state. And we've seen an increase in voter participation. Why? Again, they would tell you if you actually increase the integrity of elections by requiring picture ID, that somehow it's going to suppress vote. The opposite happens, Mr. Speaker. Because what really does happen is voters now have confidence in the sanctity of elections. More people will participate because they know that somebody's not going to be stealing their vote by showing up when they're not supposed to be there, just by requiring a picture ID. But Americans have been asked about this. An overwhelming 83% of Americans are in favor of requiring a photo ID to vote. 83, that's not Republicans, that's all across the spectrum. Over 70% of Democrats support picture ID. 82% of Hispanic Americans support picture ID to vote. 76% of Black Americans support a picture ID to vote. But if they still want to lie to people on the other side, Mr. Speaker, if they still want to try to scare people and talk about Jim Crow, then you might want to ask those same people, why did the Democrat Party at their convention just in 2024 require a photo ID to get in? You couldn't get into the Democrat convention without showing a photo ID. So if they want to call it Jim Crow, they need to look in the mirror, Mr. Speaker. But if you want to ensure the sanctity of the vote, the Save America Act does that. You will see higher participation because Americans across all spectrums, Black, white, Hispanic, Republican, Democrat, Independent, will know that there is a higher likelihood that nobody there is showing up illegally to steal your vote if you've got the right to vote. One person, one vote. That's the mantra that we all ought to embrace. The Save America Act gets us back to that great franchise of American democracy, and that is the right to vote. I would urge everybody to pass this bill over to the Senate, and then the Senate to get it to President Trump's desk so we can strengthen American democracy. With that, I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I inquire as to the amount of time remaining?
Gentleman has 12 3/4 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do want to just comment and remark that, we have heard repeatedly one person who's a non-U.S. citizen voting is too many, and I agree. We have laws to prevent it. But how many people is it okay to deny U.S. citizens who want to participate the right? To me, that would be the greater evil. We have 80 million Americans, voter-eligible U.S. citizens who didn't vote in the last presidential election. Isn't that astonishing? It's a big number, so it's hard to get your head around. 80 million Americans didn't participate. Now, I'm not saying that's anyone's fault, but I am saying this. We should be, our committee and our House should be focused on how do we increase voter participation? How do we make it so that more people feel as though they should engage? So that's the only way we'll get to the true promise of American democracy when all 244 million Americans who are U.S. citizens participate in our election. And we should be doing everything we can to make that as easy for those people to do. It is their God-given right. It is an inalienable right, as we often say. With that, I'd like to yield a minute to the gentle lady from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez.
Gentle lady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, as I hear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, what I hear is the same racist, misogynistic trash, different decade. Republicans are invoking historical policies intended, let's be clear, to disenfranchise Americans, especially working people, women, students, indigenous people, and anyone who can't afford the burdens of a new bill. The Save America Act is yet another Republican attempt to intimidate and suppress the votes of anyone who threatens their extremist white supremacist agenda. Don't take my word for it. Just look for the threats to surround the polls with gun-wielding masked men, and it'll become clear to you that Trump and Republicans want to control who votes so they can remain in power. That's not democracy. That is destroying free, fair elections. It's just another page from the authoritarian playbook, and we must have the moral clarity in this place to stand against it, just like our ancestors did. I want to urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill and to vote with moral clarity. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I inquire how much time is remaining.
Gentleman has 14 3/4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, to speak on the bill.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong and unapologetic support of the Save America Act, legislation that defends the integrity of our elections and makes one principle perfectly clear. U.S. elections are for U.S. citizens only. This is not extreme. It's common sense. Citizenship matters. Sovereignty matters. And Americans alone must decide America's future. Yet radical Democrats have abandoned this standard. New York City has allowed non-citizens to vote in local elections. Washington, D.C. has done the same, granting political power to foreign nationals in the capital of our nation. Georgia's own Senator John Ossoff, who once said that voter ID was right and appropriate, now supports his party is reframing it as voter suppression. The law didn't change. Public opinion didn't change. What changed was he and other Democrat politicians like him realized that illegal immigrants could no longer vote to keep Democrats in office. They oppose this bill because it chips away at their voting base, plain and simple. For years, conservatives warned that this was the radical left's goal, and we were mocked for it. But that's exactly what Democrats are doing right now, fighting to allow illegal aliens to vote. This is not only grotesquely unjust, but it waters down the meaning of American citizenship. By passing this bill, we reaffirm a simple but sacred truth. American elections belong to Americans. No loopholes, no exceptions, no apologies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell.
Gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, we're debating this bill because Donald Trump is still trying to overturn an election that he lost 6 years ago, and some in this body are helping him do it. The Save America Act is built on a lie, the lie that the 2020 election was stolen. That lie has been investigated, litigated, audited, and debunked over and over again. But instead of accepting reality, the authors of this bill are using that lie as an excuse to take control of our elections. This is not on the level. And let's be honest about where this is coming from. From the president himself. We're being asked to trust Donald Trump and his allies about elections while he is actively trying to subvert them. That is dangerous, and Congress should not be a willing partner in it. Our democracy does not need a takeover. It needs truth, and this bill has none of it. I yield my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to our colleague from North Carolina, Mr. Harris, to speak on the bill.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, what do airplanes, Costco, alcohol, tobacco, entering a nightclub, and opening a checking account all have in common? You have to show your ID. We require identification for everyday activities. Why on earth would we not require it for something as sacred as determining the future of this republic? When the Save America Act becomes the law of the land, 3 simple things will be true. Number 1, everyone who shows up to vote in a federal election will have to show their photo ID. Number 2, states will only register American citizens to vote in federal elections. And number 3, states will actually have to remove non-citizens from the voter rolls. Every American, Republican, Democrat, or unaffiliated, wants to know that their vote counts and is not canceled out by someone who is here illegally. This bill ensures just that. The right to vote is precious, and the SAVE Act restores confidence, strengthens integrity, and protects the voice of every lawful American citizen. I'm confident my colleagues in the House will do the right thing and vote to secure our elections. So I address my colleagues in the Senate. Save America. Bring this bill to the Senate floor to debate. Own your position in front of the American people. You must use every tool at your disposal, including the talking filibuster, to ensure that this bill makes it to President Trump's desk. We cannot delay securing our elections and defending our republic. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. One other thing states will be required to do. States would be forced to give your personal information to the Department of Homeland Security and ICE. And that, Mr. Speaker, creates great concern by members of this side of the aisle, and I think the vast majority of American citizens. With that, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Subramaniam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the ranking member. I rise in strong opposition to the so-called Save America Act. The supporters of this bill claim that undocumented immigrants are overrunning our elections and voting in droves, but I'll give you an example of the reality. We actually did a study in Virginia of all the election irregularities over 20 years, and how many instances of non-citizens voting do you think we found? Zero. We found zero. And another study in analyzing Heritage Foundation data found that this was pretty much non-existent between 1999 and 2023 in the United States. They are solving a problem that does not exist. And what this bill does do is make other problems and make it harder to vote. It undermines our democracy, makes it harder for military voters who move a lot, harder for families impacted by natural disasters who lose documents, and harder for the nearly 70 million women who have changed their name after marriage and have birth certificates that no longer match their photo IDs, and harder for the half of Americans who don't have passports. The president claims that this is just an attempt to secure our elections, but let's be real, this is just another attempt to tilt the electoral deck in his favor. And if you want to make elections safer, we should stop threatening to nationalize elections, stop threatening to have ICE at voting locations. So why don't we save America from this bill and vote no? I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 90 seconds to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington, the chairman of the Budget Committee.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 90 seconds.
I think my dear friend from Wisconsin, Mr. Speaker, there's not a better example of political expediency than my Democrat colleagues opposing a voter ID law on the grounds of states' rights. First, the Constitution's clear. Rules for running elections have been delegated to the states. But in that same provision, the Constitution says Congress may at any time alter the process. Certainly, I think our founding fathers would support strengthening the integrity of our elections. And Democrats know this, Mr. Speaker. They must think the American people, though, have forgotten about their, quote, For the Politicians Act in the 117th Congress, where they basically codified a COVID-era fraud-ridden election law that included, ironically, prohibiting voter ID, essentially. Also, ballot harvesting, promoting mass voting by mail, and to take taxpayer dollars to fund political campaigns. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. Democrats believe Congress has the power to ban voter ID, but not the power to require it. This shouldn't be controversial. Requiring proof of citizenship to register and a valid voter ID is as common sense as it gets. American elections are for American citizens, Mr. Speaker, and I urge a yes vote on the Save America Act, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, may I inquire one more time on the amount of time remaining?
Gentleman has 8.5 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do want to just correct one thing. Well, we certainly care about states' rights. We understand what the Constitution says, but what I'm really concerned about is people's rights. Every American should understand this. I want to say this again. The Save America Act requires states to surrender you, the people, your entire information on the voter rolls, private, personal voter information to DHS. Save America is a clear attempt to nationalize elections by involving Kristi Noem and the Department of Homeland Security, the rogue department, into our elections. Go up and down your streets, knock on doors, ask how many of your neighbors think that that's a good idea. And with that, let me please yield 2.5 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady, the Democratic whip from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's be clear here. Republicans aren't worried about non-citizens voting. They're afraid of actual American citizens voting. Why? Because they're losing. Among women, they're losing by 10 points in the upcoming midterms. Because losing is what happens when you tell people you're going to tackle the high cost of living and you turn around and hike their health care premiums. You hike their grocery costs. Also, billionaires can weasel out of paying their fair share. They're trying to say this is a voter ID bill. That's not what's happening here. Let's just look at a typical mom. You guys must know some working mothers. The ones that I hear from across my district and across this country, they are struggling to put food on the table for their kids, working 2 jobs to try and make ends meet, trying to juggle getting their kids to school, maybe catching an occasional game, fearing they're never going to be able to find childcare they can afford, and praying nobody in the family gets sick because they can't afford a doctor either. And now you're going to say to those women, because they got married and changed their names, they have to go down to a clerk and prove they're citizens, sign affidavits, do this in person. This is a minefield of red tape that you have put in front of women and American citizens and their right to vote. And thanks to the gentlewoman from South Carolina, the so-called champion of women and safe places, this bill will now go into effect immediately, which means primaries that are weeks from now, all of these people are going to be met with the fact they didn't have time or know they had to prove their citizenship. Good luck voting, ladies. And as a kicker, the bill mandates that every state turn over their voter rolls to DHS and Kristi Noem. This bill, Mr. Speaker, is an outrage. This is election rigging. This is voter suppression. The American people aren't going to stand for it, and nobody should vote for it. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 90 seconds to the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hegeman.
Gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized for 90 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of Senate File or S 1383, the Save America Act, which I am proud to co-sponsor and hope will pass the House floor today. I'd also note that I think that it is shockingly racist and sexist for my colleagues on the other side to believe that we are not smart enough to figure out how to get IDs. I can assure you that we are, even if we get married. The Save America Act requires individuals to provide documented proof of U.S. citizenship along with a valid photo ID when registering to vote. This common sense legislation strengthens election integrity through practical measures, including voter ID requirements and safeguards to prevent non-citizens from voting. The Save America Act is particularly important as we continue to address the consequences of the Biden-Harris border crisis, which led to millions of individuals entering the country unlawfully. Secure elections are fundamental to maintaining public confidence in our democratic process. The state of Wyoming has already taken steps to implement many of the reforms outlined in this bill, demonstrating that securing our elections must be a national priority. I thank the bill's sponsors, Representative Roy and Senator Lee, as well as Chairman Stile, for their leadership on this critical issue. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting in favor of the Save America Act. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate the gentlelady from Wyoming, but I guarantee you American women are smart, and we believe that. And they will be smart enough to see that the legal hurdles and burdens being put in place of them, in front of them by this legislation, are not only unnecessary, but incredibly burdensome and attempt to make their lives so much more difficult. I do want to just make a comment too, Mr. Speaker. Late last night, the Republicans offered a manager's amendment that would move up several of the effective dates in this bill, which were supposed to take effect in 2027. I think it bears noting that if this bill becomes law, they will now be effective immediately. This amendment was offered initially by our colleague, Ms. Mace of South Carolina. Chairman Stile took the mantle of it. I'm sure the members of this committee know Arkansas, Texas, Illinois, Mississippi, and North Carolina all have March primaries. In fact, many of the UOCAVA ballots for these primaries have already been mailed to Americans overseas. So how are election administrators in these states supposed to even begin to comply with a new federal law that takes effect in the middle of voting? This is, quite frankly, election malpractice. It shouldn't be before us. And yesterday, the Committee on House Administration heard from a former executive director of North Carolina's voting who called this effective date unworkable. And I think that sums it up well. This is a mistake. It's a mistake in so many different ways. The other thing I would just say, because I've heard a lot about this now, there's not one person on this side of the aisle who thinks non-U.S. citizens should be participating in American election. Not one. Not one has said it, despite the repeated allegations that that's the case. But I do want to ask, are congressional Republicans okay with masked federal agents hiding their faces, hiding their badge numbers from the American public, but want to force American citizens to turn over their addresses to Kristi Noem's Department of Homeland Security? I suspect not. With that, I'll reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I inquire how much time I have remaining.
Gentleman has 8 3/4 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew, to speak on the bill.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How is this even a serious debate? Think about what my colleagues on the other side are saying today. They're saying that American minorities are not capable of showing an ID to vote. It's an insult. It's abusive. In reality, 76% of Black Americans support voter ID in poll after poll. 82% of Latino Americans support voter ID in poll after poll. What the left is saying is they don't trust the American people to prove who they really are. Americans show ID to board a plane. Americans show ID to drive a car. Americans show ID to open a bank account. Americans show ID to enter federal buildings and a host of other reasons. Of course, we should expect it for American elections. It doesn't silence voters, it empowers voters. It only ensures Americans are voting in American elections. For God's sake, why would anybody be opposed to that? Think about it. I yield back.
Gentleman. Okay, gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'll reserve.
Okay. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bean, to speak on the bill.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman, for the time. I rise today in support of the Save America Act to show an ID before you cast your ballot. Now, I've heard, Mr. Speaker, on the other side of the aisle in this very debate, it's already illegal to cast a ballot when you're not eligible to vote. It's already illegal. We don't need another law. Well, let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, it's already illegal for a minor to purchase alcohol, but yet the clerk says, please show me your ID. America is hungry for fair elections. I don't think it's too much to ask that we show an ID to restore election integrity. Let's give America what they want. For all those who say it's too much to ask to show an ID, I say it's nonsense. One citizen, one vote is the foundation of our republic. And Mr. Speaker, let me go ahead and do the math for you and everybody in this room. One illegal vote is one too many. Let's pass the Save America Act now, and let's save voter integrity and voter elections right now. Let's do it, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
I reserve and I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from Wisconsin reserves, prepared to close. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I'm ready to close. Yeah.
From New York's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would note that it's been a vigorous debate, and I continue to argue that this bill, in the strongest terms, should not be passed. I do want to just note, particularly from members who spoke here today, that, for instance, in my dear friend Chairman Stiles' district, 165,000 women in his district have a different name on their birth certificate than their current photo ID, and 346,000 residents of Wisconsin's 1st District lack a passport, and it would cost them nearly $45 million for those people to purchase a passport. For Ms. Miller, 150,000 women in her district, 414,000 residents lack in her district passport. It would cost them $53 million. Mr. Burchett, 176,000 women, 390,000 residents don't have a passport, which would cost them $50.8 million. Ms. Luna has 170,000 women who have different names on birth certificate and photo ID. 319,000 of her residents lack a passport. $41 million would be needed to purchase that for all of them. Ms. Tenney, 145,000 women in her district. 420,000 residents without a passport, cost them $54 million. Mr. Speaker, you have an estimated 170,000 women. 397,000 residents lack a passport. The list goes on and on. That's the impact of this. But look, here's the truth, Mr. Speaker. President Trump wants to take over American elections this November to maintain his tenuous grip on power. So Republicans have a singular purpose in supporting the Save America Act, helping the president get what he wants. That's what they are always about, helping the president get what he wants, not the American people. Republicans are falling over each other to help Donald Trump nationalize the 2026 midterm elections. You don't have to take my word for it. This is what the president is trying to do. He says it. He always says the quiet part out loud. He said, we, meaning the Republicans, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. That's what the president said. That's why this bill forces states to surrender your personal, private information to the Department of Homeland Security, to the department that has unleashed ICE brutality on the streets of America against American citizens. The bill is so extreme, even a Republican senator said this week she opposes it, calling it a federal overreach. In response, in just a moment, I will offer a motion to commit. This motion to commit would send this bill to committee with an instruction to strip the provision that gives your address, your personal information to the Department of Homeland Security. I warn Republicans that a vote against this motion to commit is a vote to send American citizens' data to the Department of Homeland Security. A vote against this MTC is a vote to put Kristi Noem and Donald Trump and ICE and the Department of Justice in charge of the midterm elections this fall. So I urge you all, vote yes on the motion to commit, because Kristi Noem should not control our elections. Donald Trump should not control our elections. We, the American people, the people of the United States, we control our elections. With that, I urge defeat of the main motion, support of the motion to commit, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I inquire how much time I have remaining.
6.25 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself so much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Let's bring this debate to its close. The question before members of the House of Representatives is very clear. One, do you think individuals should be U.S. citizens and prove that when they register to vote? Yes or no? Two, should individuals going to vote need to present voter ID upon arrival at the polls? Yes or no? If you believe, like I do, in a common sense proposal to make sure that only U.S. citizens are registering to vote and that people are who they say they are when they go to the polls, you should vote yes. The answer to this is easy. It's common sense. That's why it's popular. Let's make sure we reinstall integrity in our elections. But for the record, let me just clear up a few misconceptions that our colleagues on the left have tried time and time again to bring. First, are non-citizens voting in U.S. elections? We know what the Democrats' playbook is, and we only have to look here at our nation's capital, where non-citizens under current law are allowed to vote in municipal elections. We know our Democratic colleagues want non-citizens to vote in U.S. elections. It's why making sure that we're ensuring individuals who are registering to vote, in particular for federal elections, are U.S. citizens. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle bring up the married woman argument. As you may know, Mr. Speaker, I'm engaged, going to be married in a few weeks from now. My fiancée is planning to change her name and move to the great state of Wisconsin and register to vote. Her and countless of other individuals will have no problem registering under this bill. You can bring forward your identification. You could sign an attestation if you don't have the documentation. We want to make sure that it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. We could look at our committee hearing that we had just this week, where we brought in the Secretary of State of the state of Wyoming that has strong election integrity provisions. We asked the gentleman on the record, the Secretary of State, Wyoming has delivered and shown the American people that you can implement citizenship verification and photo identification without the problems, without the hyperbole that we continue to hear on the left. We heard hyperbole as it relates to information being shared with DHS SAVE database. They only offer the first part, that it goes to DHS. But why? Read the bill. To actually check if individuals who are on the voter rolls in states across the country are citizens of the United States. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't want to check the voter rolls to determine if an individual is a citizen of the United States. It should leave you a great question as to why they're concerned. We should be checking and cleaning up the voter rolls and removing individuals who are not eligible to vote, because every citizen deserves the right to vote. One individual who's ineligible to vote is one too many, because it casts out the vote of a legal United States citizen. And finally, we hear arguments against voter ID. This is a core common sense principle. My colleague, Mr. Bean, brought up the example, it's illegal for an underage individual to purchase a beer. But as you go in and buy a beer, you get asked for your ID. As I said earlier, I think it's absolutely nuts that we protect our beer more than our ballots in jurisdictions across this country. If you're like me and think that we should have voter ID, you vote yes on the Save America Act. This is our opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to take a major step forward in election integrity, making sure that U.S. elections are for U.S. citizens only, and making sure that people are who they say they are by checking voter ID when individuals go to vote. It's a common sense proposal. The American people will get to see where their member stands, and I encourage every member of this chamber to vote yes on the Save America Act. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1050, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question's on the third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
An act to establish the Veterans Advisory Committee on Equal Access and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to commit at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Morelli of New York moves to commit the bill, Senate 1383, to the Committee on House Administration.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to commit. The question's on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.
Which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will redesignate the motion.
Motion to commit, Senate 1383, offered by Mr. Morelli of New York.
The question is on agreeing to the motion to commit. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 214 and the nays are 217. The motion is not adopted. The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. Yeah, I don't know. I got stuck. The clutch. You think I hadn't done this before? No, it's funny that sometimes you do that, and then this looks like subtitles or whatever, like in a book, references. Yeah. And I just kind of clutched on that one. This one will be interesting. I'm curious. We'll pull some down. We did 4 last year. As I was saying, I don't know if you were standing here when I was talking about the polling on this, but 71 or 72. I know I would. They said they could hear us on TV. Remaining. On this vote, the yeas are 218 and the nays are 213. The bill is passed without objection. A motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Here, engrossed Amendment House, February 11, 2026. In the House of Representatives, U.S. February 11, 2026. Resolved, that the bill from the Senate, S. 1383, entitled An Act to Establish the Veterans Advisory Committee on Equal Access, and for other purposes, do pass with the following amendment. Strike out all after the enacting clause and insert Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act or the Save America Act. SEC. 2. Ensuring only citizens are registered to vote in elections for federal office. A. Definition of documentary proof of United States citizenship. Section 3 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20502, is amended. Share this. 1. By striking as used and inserting A. in general as used. And 2. By adding at the end the following. B. Documentary proof of United States citizenship as used in this act. The term documentary proof of United States citizenship means, with respect to an applicant for voter registration, any of the following. 1. A form of identification issued consistent with the requirements of the Real ID Act of 2005 that indicates the applicant is a citizen of the United States. 2. A valid United States passport. 3. The applicant's official United States military identification card, together with the United States military record of service showing that the applicant's place of birth was in the United States. 4. A valid government-issued photo identification card issued by a federal, state or tribal government showing that the applicant's place of birth was in the United States. 5. A valid government-issued photo identification card issued by a federal, state or tribal government other than an identification described in paragraphs 1 through 4, but only if presented together with one or more of the following. A certified birth certificate issued by a state, a unit of local government in a state, or a tribal government which I. was issued by the state, unit of local government, or tribal government in which the applicant was born. E. was filed with the office responsible for keeping vital records in the state. i.e., includes the full name, date of birth, and place of birth of the applicant. If lists the full names of one or both of the parents of the applicant. V. has the signature of an individual who is authorized to sign birth certificates on behalf of the state, unit of local government, or tribal government in which the applicant was born. Vi. includes the date that the certificate was filed with the office responsible for keeping vital records in the state. And Vi. has the seal of the state, unit of local government, or tribal government that issued the birth certificate. B. An extract from a United States hospital record of birth created at the time of the applicant's birth which indicates that the applicant's place of birth was in the United States. C. A final adoption decree showing the applicant's name, and that the applicant's place of birth was in the United States. D. A consular report of birth abroad of a citizen of the United States or a certification of the applicant's report of birth of a United States citizen issued by the Secretary of State. E. A naturalization certificate or certificate of citizenship issued by the Secretary of Homeland Security or any other document or method of proof of United States citizenship issued by the federal government pursuant to the Immigration and Nationality Act. F. An American Indian card issued by the Department of Homeland Security with the classification KIC. B. Application of Requirements Section 4 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20503, is amended by striking subsection B and inserting the following. B. Requiring applicants to present documentary proof of United States citizenship under any method of voter registration in a state. The state shall not accept and process an application to register to vote in an election for federal office unless the applicant presents documentary proof of United States citizenship with the application. C. Registration with application for motor vehicle driver's license Section 5 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20,504, is amended. 1. In subsection A. 1. By striking each state motor vehicle driver's license application and inserting subject to the requirements under Section 8. J. Each state motor vehicle driver's license application. 2. In subsection C. 1. By striking each state shall include and inserting subject to the requirements under Section 8. J. Each state shall include. 3. In subsection C. 2. B. A. In clause I. By striking an at the end. B. In clause E. By adding an at the end. And C. By adding at the end the following new clause. I.e., verify that the applicant is a citizen of the United States. 4. In subsection C. 2. C. I. By striking, including citizenship, and inserting, including the requirement that the applicant provides documentary proof of United States citizenship. And 5. In subsection C. 2. D. I.e., by striking and inserting the following, other than as evidence in a criminal proceeding or immigration proceeding brought against an applicant who knowingly attempts to register to vote, and knowingly makes a false declaration under penalty of perjury that the applicant meets the eligibility requirements to register to vote in an election for federal office. And D. Requiring documentary proof of United States citizenship with National Mail Voter Registration Form Section 6 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20,505, is amended. 1. In subsection A. 1. A. By striking each state shall accept and use and inserting subject to the requirements under Section 8. J. Each state shall accept and use. And B. By striking Federal Election Commission and inserting Election Assistance Commission. 2. In subsection B. By adding at the end the following. The chief state election official of a state shall take such steps as may be necessary to ensure that residents of the state are aware of the requirement to provide documentary proof of United States citizenship to register to vote in elections for federal office in the state. 3. In subsection C. 1. A. In subparagraph A. By striking an at the end. B. In subparagraph B. By striking the period at the end, and inserting and C. By adding at the end the following new subparagraph. C. The person did not provide documentary proof of United States citizenship when registering to vote. And 4. By adding at the end the following new subsection. E. Ensuring proof of United States citizenship. 1. Presenting proof of United States citizenship to election official and applicant who submits the mail voter registration application form prescribed by the Election Assistance Commission pursuant to Section 9, A, 2, or a form described in paragraph 1, or 2, of subsection A, shall not be registered to vote in an election for federal office unless A. The applicant presents documentary proof of United States citizenship in person to the office of the appropriate election official not later than the deadline provided by state law for the receipt of a completed voter registration application for the election. Or B. In the case of a state which permits an individual to register to vote in an election for federal office at a polling place on the day of the election, and on any day when voting, including early voting, is permitted for the election, the applicant presents documentary proof of United States citizenship to the appropriate election official at the polling place not later than the date of the election. 2. Notification of requirement upon receiving an otherwise completed mail voter registration application form prescribed by the Election Assistance Commission pursuant to Section 9, A, 2, or a form described in paragraph 1, or 2, of subsection A. The appropriate election official shall transmit a notice to the applicant of the requirement to present documentary proof of United States citizenship under the subsection, and shall include in the notice instructions to enable the applicant to meet the requirement. 3. Accessibility. Each state shall, in consultation with the Election Assistance Commission, ensure that reasonable accommodations are made to allow an individual with a disability who submits the mail voter registration application form prescribed by the Election Assistance Commission pursuant to Section 9, A, 2, or a form described in paragraph 1 or 2 of subsection A, to present documentary proof of United States citizenship to the appropriate election official. E. Requirements for Voter Registration Agency Section 7 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20506, is amended. 1. In subsection A. In paragraph 4, by adding at the end the following new clause. If receipt of documentary proof of United States citizenship of each applicant to register to vote in elections for federal office in the state. And B. In paragraph 6. In subparagraph A, by striking, including citizenship, and inserting, including the requirement that the applicant provides documentary proof of United States citizenship. E. By redesignating subparagraphs B and C as subparagraphs C and D, respectively. And i.e., by inserting after subparagraph A the following new subparagraph. B. Ask the applicant the question, are you a citizen of the United States? And if the applicant answers in the affirmative, require documentary proof of United States citizenship prior to providing the form under subparagraph C. And 2. In subsection C. 1. By inserting who are citizens of the United States after for persons. F. Requirements with respect to administration of voter registration. Section 8 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20507, is amended. 1. In subsection A. By striking in the administration of voter registration and inserting subject to the requirements of subsection J in the administration of voter registration. And B. In paragraph 3. In subparagraph B, by striking or at the end. And E. By adding at the end the following new subparagraphs. D. Based on documentary proof or verified information that the registrant is not a United States citizen. Or E. The registration otherwise fails to comply with applicable state law. 2. By redesignating subsection J as subsection L. And 3. By inserting after subsection I the following new subsections. J. Ensuring only citizens are registered to vote. 1. In general, notwithstanding any other provision of this act, a state may not register an individual to vote in elections for federal office held in the state unless, at the time the individual applies to register to vote, the individual provides documentary proof of United States citizenship. 2. Requirement in cases of name discrepancies in documentation. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, a state shall accept and process an application to register to vote in an election for federal office if the applicant A. Presents with the application documentation that would constitute documentary proof of United States citizenship, except that the name on the documentation is not the name of the applicant. And B. Provides, through a process established by the state, which shall be subject to any relevant guidance adopted by the Election Assistance Commission. Additional documentation as necessary to establish that the name on the documentation is a previous name of the applicant. Or E. An affidavit signed by the applicant attesting that the name on the documentation is a previous name of the applicant. 3. Additional processes in certain cases. A. Process for those without documentary proof. In general, subject to any relevant guidance adopted by the Election Assistance Commission, each state shall establish a process under which an applicant who cannot provide documentary proof of United States citizenship under paragraph 1 may, if the applicant signs an attestation under penalty of perjury that the applicant is a citizen of the United States and eligible to vote in elections for federal office, submit such other evidence to the appropriate state or local official demonstrating that the applicant is a citizen of the United States, and such official shall make a determination as to whether the applicant has sufficiently established United States citizenship for purposes of registering to vote in elections for federal office in the state. E. Affidavit requirement. If a state or local official makes a determination under Clause I that an applicant has sufficiently established United States citizenship for purposes of registering to vote in elections for federal office in the state. Such determination shall be accompanied by an affidavit developed under clause, i.e., signed by the official swearing or affirming the applicant sufficiently established United States citizenship for purposes of registering to vote. i.e., development of affidavit by the Election Assistance Commission. The Election Assistance Commission shall develop a uniform affidavit for use by state and local officials under clause E, which shall I. include an explanation of the minimum standards required for a state or local official to register an applicant who cannot provide documentary proof of United States citizenship to vote in elections for federal office in the state. And the second, require the official to explain the basis for registering such applicant to vote in such elections. B. Process in case of certain discrepancies in documentation subject to any relevant guidance adopted by the Election Assistance Commission. Each state shall establish a process under which an applicant can provide such additional documentation to the appropriate election official of the state as may be necessary to establish that the applicant is a citizen of the United States in the event of a discrepancy with respect to the applicant's documentary proof of United States citizenship. 4. State requirements not later than 30 days after the date of the enactment of this subsection. A. Each state shall take affirmative steps, on an ongoing basis, to ensure that only United States citizens are registered to vote under the provisions of this Act, and such affirmative steps shall include the establishment of a program described in subparagraphs B and C. B. Each state shall submit the complete, official list of individuals registered as eligible voters for federal office in the state to the Department of Homeland Security for comparison through the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements, SAVE, system for the purposes of identifying individuals who are not citizens of the United States and taking the necessary steps to remove such individuals who are not citizens from the official list. After notice is given to such individuals and such individuals are given the opportunity to provide documentary proof of United States citizenship, but a state with a memorandum of agreement for such purposes with the Department of Homeland Security on the date of the enactment of this subsection may comply with this subparagraph by carrying out such purposes under the memorandum. C. Each state may utilize such other sources of data available to the state for the purposes of identifying individuals who are not citizens of the United States and removing such individuals from the official list of eligible voters for federal office in the state, including, but not limited to, the following. I. State agencies that supply state identification cards or driver's licenses where the agency confirms the United States citizenship status of applicants. E. Other sources, including databases and information provided pursuant to an agreement with the Commissioner of Social Security under Section 205, R. 9, of the Social Security Act, which can be used to confirm United States citizenship status, except that any such information provided by the Commissioner may not be the sole grounds for the removal of an individual from the official list of eligible voters for elections for federal office in a state. 5. Availability of information. A. In general at the request of a state election official, including a request related to a process established by a state under paragraph 3A or 3B. Any head of a federal department or agency possessing information relevant to determining the eligibility of an individual to vote in elections for federal office shall, not later than 24 hours after receipt of such request, provide the official with such information as may be necessary to enable the official to verify that an applicant for voter registration in elections for federal office held in the state or a registrant on the official list of eligible voters in elections for federal office held in the state is a citizen of the United States, which shall include providing the official with such batched information as may be requested by the official. B. Use of SAFE system. The Secretary of Homeland Security may respond to a request received under paragraph 1. By using the system for the verification of immigration status under the applicable provisions of Section 1137 of the Social Security Act, 42 U.S.C. 1320 bits-7, as established pursuant to Section 121, C, of the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, Public Law 99-603. C. Sharing of information. The heads of federal departments and agencies shall share information with each other with respect to an individual who is the subject of a request received under paragraph A, in order to enable them to respond to the request. D. Investigation for purposes of removal. The Secretary of Homeland Security shall conduct an investigation to determine whether to initiate removal proceedings under Section 239 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1229, if it is determined pursuant to subparagraph A or B that an alien, as such term is defined in Section 101 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1101, is unlawfully registered to vote in elections for federal office. E. Prohibiting fees. The head of a federal department or agency may not charge a fee for responding to a state's request under paragraph A. K. Removal of non-citizens from registration rolls. A state shall remove an individual who is not a citizen of the United States from the official list of eligible voters for elections for federal office held in the state at any time upon receipt of documentation or verified information that a registrant is not a United States citizen. G. Clarification of authority of state to remove non-citizens from official list of eligible voters. 1. In General Section 8, A, 4, of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20507, A, 4, is amended. A. By striking or at the end of subparagraph A. B. By adding or at the end of subparagraph B. And C. By adding at the end the following new subparagraph. C. Documentary proof or verified information that the registrant is not a United States citizen. 2. Conforming Amendment Section 8, C, 2, B, I, of such Act, 52 U.S.C. 20507, C, 2, B, I, is amended by striking 4, A, and inserting 4, A, or C. H. Requirements with respect to federal mail voter registration form. 1. Contents of mail voter registration form. Section 9, B, of such Act, 52 U.S.C. 20508, B, is amended. A. In paragraph 2, by striking, including citizenship, and inserting, including an explanation of what is required to present documentary proof of United States citizenship. B. In paragraph 3, by striking an at the end. C. In paragraph 4, by striking the period at the end, and inserting and D. By adding at the end the following new paragraph. 5. Shall include a section, for use only by a state or local election official, to record the type of document the applicant presented as documentary proof of United States citizenship, including the date of issuance, the date of expiration, if any, the office which issued the document, and any unique identification number associated with the document. 2. Information on mail voter registration form. Section 9, B, 4, of such Act, 52 U.S.C. 20508, B, 4, is amended. A. By redesignating clauses I through IE as subparagraphs A through C, respectively. And B. In subparagraph C, as so redesignated and as amended by paragraph 1, C, by striking and inserting the following, other than as evidence in a criminal proceeding or immigration proceeding brought against an applicant who attempts to register to vote, and makes a false declaration under penalty of perjury that the applicant meets the eligibility requirements to register to vote in an election for federal office. And I. Private right of action. Section 11, B, 1, of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20510, B, 1, is amended by striking a violation of this Act and inserting a violation of this Act, including the act of an election official who registers an applicant to vote in an election for federal office who fails to present documentary proof of United States citizenship. J. Criminal penalty. Section 12, 2, of such Act, 52 U.S.C. 20511, 2, is amended. 1. By striking or at the end of subparagraph A. 2. By redesignating subparagraph B. as subparagraph D. And 3. By inserting after subparagraph A the following new subparagraphs. B. In the case of an officer or employee of the executive branch, providing material assistance to a non-citizen in attempting to register to vote or vote in an election for federal office. C. Registering an applicant to vote in an election for federal office who fails to present documentary proof of United States citizenship. Or K. Special rule for states not requiring voter registration. Section 4 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20503, as amended by subsection B, is amended by adding at the end the following. C. Special rule for states not requiring voter registration in the case of a state or jurisdiction that does not require voter registration as a requirement to vote in an election for federal office on or after the date of the enactment of the subsection. The state or jurisdiction shall be deemed to meet the requirements of this act if the state or jurisdiction establishes a system for confirming the citizenship of individuals voting in an election for federal office prior to the first day for voting with respect to such election, and provides such confirmation of citizenship status for each eligible voter to election officials at the polling places during the voting period. L. Election Assistance Commission guidance not later than 10 days after the date of the enactment of this act. The Election Assistance Commission shall adopt and transmit to the chief state election official of each state guidance with respect to the implementation of the requirements under the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20501 et seq., as amended by this section. M. Inapplicability of Paperwork Reduction Act Subchapter I of Chapter 35 of Title 44, commonly referred to as the Paperwork Reduction Act, shall not apply with respect to the development or modification of voter registration materials under the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20501 et seq., as amended by this section, including the development or modification of any voter registration application forms. N. Duty of Secretary of Homeland Security to notify election officials of naturalization upon receiving information that an individual has become a naturalized citizen of the United States. The Secretary of Homeland Security shall promptly provide notice of such information to the appropriate chief election official of the state in which such individual is domiciled. O. Rule of construction regarding provisional ballots. Nothing in this section or in any amendment made by this section may be construed to supersede, restrict, or otherwise affect the ability of an individual to cast a provisional ballot in an election for federal office or to have the ballot counted in the election if the individual is verified as a citizen of the United States pursuant to Section 8J of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, as added by subsection F. P. Rule of construction regarding effect on state exemptions from other federal laws. Nothing in this section or in any amendment made by this section may be construed to affect the exemption of a state from any requirement of any federal law other than the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, 52 U.S.C. 20501 et seq. Q. Exception for absent uniformed services voters. The requirements in this section shall not apply with respect to an applicant who is an absent uniformed services voter, as defined in Section 107(1) of the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, 52 U.S.C. 20310, 1. R. Effective date. This section and the amendments made by this section shall take effect on the date of the enactment of this section, and shall apply with respect to applications for voter registration which are submitted on or after such date. SEC. 3. Requiring voters to provide photo identification. A. Requirement to provide photo identification as condition of casting ballot. 1. In General Title III of the Help America Vote Act of 2002, 52 U.S.C. 21081 et seq., is amended by inserting after Section 303 the following new section. SEC. 303A. Photo identification requirements. A. Provision of identification required as condition of casting ballot. 1. Individuals voting in person. A. Requirement to provide identification notwithstanding any other provision of law, and except as provided in subparagraph B The appropriate state or local election official may not provide a ballot for an election for federal office to an individual who desires to vote in person unless the individual presents to the official a valid physical photo identification. B. Availability of provisional ballot. I. In general, if an individual does not present the identification required under subparagraph A, the individual shall be permitted to cast a provisional ballot with respect to the election under Section 302. Except that the appropriate state or local election official may not make a determination under Section 302. A. 4. That the individual is eligible under state law to vote in the election unless, not later than 3 days after casting the provisional ballot, the individual presents to the official I. the identification required under subparagraph A. Or the second, an affidavit developed and made available to the individual by the state attesting that the individual does not possess the identification required under subparagraph A, because the individual has a religious objection to being photographed. E. No effect on other provisional balloting rules. Nothing in clause I may be construed to apply to the casting of a provisional ballot pursuant to Section 302 A. or any state law for reasons other than the failure to present the identification required under subparagraph A. 2. Individuals voting other than in person. A. In general, notwithstanding any other provision of law, and except as provided in subparagraph B, the appropriate state or local election official may not accept any ballot for an election for federal office provided by an individual who votes other than in person unless the individual submits with the ballot I. a copy of a valid photo identification, or E. the last 4 digits of the individual's social security number and an affidavit developed and made available to the individual by the state attesting that the individual is unable to obtain a copy of a valid photo identification after making reasonable efforts to obtain such a copy. B. Exception subparagraph A. does not apply with respect to a ballot provided by I. an absent uniformed services voter, as defined in Section 107(1) of the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, 52 U.S.C. 20,310(1). Or E. An individual provided the right to vote otherwise than in person under Section 3, B, 2, B, E, of the Voting Accessibility for the Elderly and Handicapped Act, 52 U.S.C. 20,102. B. 2. B. E. B. Providing public access to digital imaging devices with respect to each state. The appropriate state or local government official of the state shall ensure, to the extent practicable, public access to a digital imaging device, which shall include a printer, copier, image scanner, or multifunction machine, at state and local government buildings in the state, including courts, libraries, and police stations, for the purpose of allowing individuals to use such a device at no cost to the individual to make a copy of a valid photo identification. C. Valid photo identifications described for purposes of this section. A valid photo identification means, with respect to an individual who seeks to vote in a state, any of the following. 1. A valid state-issued motor vehicle driver's license that includes a photo of the individual and an expiration date. 2. A valid state-issued identification card that includes a photo of the individual and an expiration date issued by a state motor vehicle authority. 3. A valid United States passport for the individual. 4. A valid military identification for the individual. 5. A valid identification document issued by a tribal government that includes a photo of the individual and an expiration date. D. Notification of identification requirement to applicants for voter registration. 1. In general, each state shall ensure that, at the time an individual applies to register to vote in elections for federal office in the state, the appropriate state or local election official notifies the individual of the photo identification requirements of this section. 2. Special rule for individuals applying to register to vote online. Each state shall ensure that, in the case of an individual who applies to register to vote in elections for federal office in the state online, the online voter registration system notifies the individual of the photo identification requirements of this section before the individual completes the online registration process. E. Effective date. This section shall take effect on the date of the enactment of this section, and shall apply with respect to elections for federal office held on or after such date. 2. Clerical amendment. The table of contents of such act is amended by inserting after the item relating to Section 303 the following new item. Secretary 303A. Photo identification requirements. B. Conforming amendment relating to voluntary guidance by Election Assistance Commission Section 311. B. Of such act, 52 U.S.C. 21101. B. Is amended. 1. By striking in at the end of paragraph 2. 2. By striking the period at the end of paragraph 3, and inserting and 3. By adding at the end the following new paragraph. 4. In the case of the recommendations with respect to Section 303A, October 1, 2025. C. Conforming amendment relating to enforcement Section 401 of such act, 52 U.S.C. 21111, is amended by striking Sections 301, 302, 303, and 304 and inserting Subtitle A of Title III. D. Effective date. This section and the amendments made by this section shall take effect on the date of the enactment of this section, and shall apply with respect to elections for federal office held on or after such date. Attest.